After the end of World War II, priorities in military technology underwent significant changes. If after World War I, armored vehicles or combat aviation were considered revolutionary breakthroughs, then by the middle of the 20th century, the lead had shifted to weapons capable of determining the fate of entire nations in a matter of minutes. In the 1950s, intercontinental ballistic missiles entered the stage, capable of delivering a nuclear warhead to the other side of the planet, leaving the enemy no time to react. The Cold War created an atmosphere in which technological progress turned into a race where every mistake could cost a country its prestige and millions of lives. Against the backdrop of all this tension, a new rocket design bureau, OKB 586,
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Your support helps the channel grow and motivates me to create even more amazing videos for you.
also known as Yuzhnoye, was established in the Soviet Union in 1959. The task set before it was quite challenging: to create a carrier capable of striking the territory of the United States in the shortest possible time and with maximum power. In the new project, Soviet engineers decided to use the experience gained during the development and testing of the R-7 rocket, which was a symbol of the first Soviet space victories. Based on it, work began on a fundamentally new and much more powerful rocket, the R-16, whose launch mass reached about 140 tons. To increase range and efficiency, a risky decision was made to switch to a different type of fuel. Traditional components were replaced with an aggressive and deadly dangerous mixture. Heptyl, an extremely toxic substance, was used as the fuel, while nitric acid enriched with nitrogen tetroxide served as the oxidizer. Yes, I understand, these are complex terms, but it's necessary to know them for an adequate understanding of the following context. So, let's continue. This combination provided a much greater impulse, but created dangerous working conditions, since even brief contact with these substances could lead to severe consequences. The choice in favor of this fuel was a kind of extremely dangerous experiment. Speed and power were traded for increased risk and vulnerability during launch preparations. The new fuel mixture opened up enormous technical prospects for the designers, and its power was sufficient to easily deliver a rather weighty argument in the form of a nuclear warhead to the territory of the United States. But behind this potential lurked a dark side, namely explosiveness, which left no room for error. During the fueling of the missile, any accidental contact or even a microscopic leak could result in a very unpleasant and large-scale explosion. That is why technical instructions required extremely strict safety measures, such as a precise sequence of actions, protective suits, and multi-level inspections. But in the conditions of the Cold War, safety was often compromised, since the main priority was following orders. The Kremlin set a strategic task for the designers: to create a carrier capable of deterring the United States from any aggressive actions. And the sooner the missile was put on combat duty, the better. The pace of creating this wonder weapon was incredibly fast, and just 6 months after work began, the first prototype of the R-16 was delivered to the Baikonur test range, and, as is customary in Muscovy, the launch time was scheduled for a symbolic date, namely the anniversary of the October Revolution of 1917. And although the first test was scheduled for October 22, 1960, the preparation itself turned into a marathon, where each day was consumed by haste and technical compromises. By the time of the launch, even according to official data, 70 serious deficiencies had been identified and eliminated. Each of these, under normal circumstances, would have been grounds to send the rocket back to the factory for a thorough analysis and correction. But this time, all the modifications were carried out directly at the test site, in field conditions, without a complete set of calculations or thorough testing, often under the open sky, and sometimes just a few hours before the next stage of work. The pressure of time and politicians forced the engineers to work in an environment where every decision was a compromise between technical correctness and relentless haste. It was a race in which no one wanted to lose, even if the price of victory turned out to be too high. All the difficulties and warnings from the engineers meant nothing in the face of the strict orders from the party leadership, and the launch deadlines could not be postponed. The date was set, and preparations were underway as if nothing could stop the process anymore. At the appointed time, the chief designer of the project and the military command arrived at Baikonur. Among those present was also the commander of the Strategic Missile Forces, Marshal Mitrofan Nedelin, who had held his position for less than a year at that point, but had already managed to immerse himself deeply in the details of the new weapon system. He closely monitored the preparation process and even made quite reasonable suggestions to the designers regarding improvements to the system. But the problem lay elsewhere. Any improvement, even the most useful one, required time and calculations in factory conditions and in the field realities of the testing ground. Among open-step winds and metal structures hastily assembled, it was almost impossible to implement. Sometimes it was necessary to resort to solutions that engineers under normal circumstances would not even consider. One of these solutions, for example, was the rocket's electrical circuits. According to the design, they were supposed to be made using special materials resistant to high loads and aggressive environments. But as a result, the necessary components simply weren't available at the right moment. Instead of the standard cables specified, only ordinary wires were found in the warehouse, which were not at all suited for that level of voltage. Their insulation began to melt already during installation, and minor damages became sources of potential short circuits. This problem was recorded more than once. Twice, defects in the wiring were found even before the rocket was sent to the test site, and both times they were hastily patched up so as not to delay the schedule. Did you think that 2 times was the end? Of course not. The third time the problem was noticed after the R-16 had already arrived at the launch pad. Here, without access to specialized equipment, the specialists had to act using improvised methods. They searched for any materials that could reinforce the damaged areas. They used the first rubberized membranes they could find in the warehouse, along with additional insulation pads that looked more like a temporary patch than a serious engineering solution. All of this only postponed the moment when the flaw would make itself known again. But in an environment where every minute was precious and political propaganda outweighed technical feasibility, such compromises became the norm. And here's another interesting fact about the materials they tried to use to fix the wiring flaws. They weren't taken from rocket manufacturing at all, but were found in an ordinary car repair shop, which, to put it mildly, is quite far from the standards and norms that strategic equipment should meet. These improvised solutions carried a hidden danger. But again, the main enemy was time and most likely the party. The initially planned launch was postponed by only 1 day, from October 22nd to October 23rd. But even this extra day did not allow them to fully eliminate all the malfunctions.